Brothers and sisters, open your eyes, because what we are dealing with today is not just inequality, not just poverty, not just unemployment. What we are witnessing, what we are living through, is modern slavery. And it's not the kind that comes with chains and whips anymore. No. It's more sophisticated, more camouflaged, more accepted. It's economic slavery wrapped in the illusion of choice. It's a plantation with cubicles, shopping malls, credit cards, and minimum wages. They don't need shackles on your body when they've shackled your mind and trapped your labor in a system that devours your energy and leaves you with just enough to survive, but never enough to be free. Modern slavery is not gone, it's just been rebranded. They didn't dismantle the slave ships. They turned them into sweatshops. They didn't break the chains. They hid them behind wages. What we're dealing with today isn't some ancient relic of human cruelty. It's a high-tech, corporate, institutionalized machine that bleeds the people dry while smiling in their faces. They sell you a lie that slavery ended in the 1800s. But if you believe that, you haven't looked around. If you believe that, you're still asleep, because slavery didn't die. It evolved. It became smarter. It became legal. And now it's everywhere. They say you're free because you can walk the streets without shackles. But what use is walking free when your stomach's empty, your rent's overdue, and your labor's bought for pennies while your bosses make millions? What kind of freedom makes you hustle from sunup to sundown just to eat, just to sleep under a roof, just to survive another damn day? What kind of freedom makes your worth depend on productivity? That's not liberty. That's labor slavery with a necktie and a time card. They've changed the tools, but not the goal. The goal is the same: keep the people working, keep them tired, keep them broke, and keep them too distracted or desperate to resist. You think slavery's gone because there's no auction block. Brother, the auction block is now digital. They scan your resume like a barcode. They measure your value in profits per hour. You think they abolished slavery when they just renamed the plantation. You're still owned, just not by one man anymore, but by corporations, by banks, by landlords, by billionaires. You don't get whipped anymore. You get evicted, fired, denied health care, denied dignity, denied a future. That's the new lash. That's the punishment for the disobedient. The system doesn't need chains anymore because now it has policies. It has police. It has poverty. It has propaganda. They teach you to worship a job like a god. They tell you your worth is your productivity. They make you believe that without their permission, you don't deserve food, shelter, or respect. And that belief, that damn lie, is the cage. That's the mental shackle that keeps people slaving willingly, even proudly. You're not free just because you're not in a cage. A man can be enslaved by lies just as deeply as by iron. He can be owned by fear just as surely as by law. And this system thrives on fear: fear of unemployment, fear of homelessness, fear of hunger, fear of failure, fear that without them you are nothing. But let me make one thing clear: they need you. You don't need them. You are the engine. You are the hands. You are the mind. You are the creator. The system doesn't feed you. It feeds on you. Without your labor, it dies. Without your compliance, it crumbles. But they've flipped the script. They've trained you to be grateful for crumbs while they feast. They give you just enough to stay alive, but never enough to be free. That's not a system built for you. That's a system built on you. Now let's talk truth. The economic systems that rule this planet were never designed to serve the people. They were designed to serve power. Every so-called modern system, capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, they all flow from the same fountain: exploitation. They dress it up in language: opportunity, development, investment, but don't be fooled. At their core, they are systems of control, control of labor, control of land, control of bodies, control of lives. And if you trace the roots of these systems, you find blood, you find chains, you find stolen land, stolen lives, stolen futures. The transatlantic slave trade wasn't just a crime against humanity. It was the foundation of Western wealth. The labor of the enslaved built empires, built nations, funded universities, enriched elites. That's not metaphor, that's math. They built their banks on bodies, their institutions on injustice, their civilization on subjugation. And when they abolished slavery, they didn't dismantle that power. They just shifted it. They just found new ways to get rich off your labor without calling it slavery. Sharecropping, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, sweatshops, 0-hour contracts, call centers, gig work, wage theft. They've always had a name for it, but never a conscience. And now they export that model across the globe. The same nations that once colonized half the planet now write the rules of the global economy. They dictate who gets rich, who stays poor, who dies in mines, and who profits from it. Look at Africa. Look at Latin America. Look at Southeast Asia. These are not poor continents. These are rich continents looted by poor people in suits. Multinational corporations suck the resources from under the feet of the people and sell it back to them at prices they can't afford. They leave behind pollution, broken promises, and dead rivers. And they call that progress. Do you think it's coincidence that the same countries that once enslaved people now dominate the global economy? Do you think it's a fluke that the descendants of the enslaved are still trapped in ghettos, still locked in cages, still underpaid, still overworked, still disrespected? This isn't an accident. It's a continuation. The plantation never closed. It just went corporate. And while they taught you to forget, they never stopped expanding. They never stopped extracting. They never stopped enslaving. So when you hear people praise the system, when they talk about free markets and entrepreneurship and upward mobility, you better ask whose freedom they're talking about, because the system was never meant to free you. It was meant to control you, to exploit you, to train you to be a worker, a consumer, a tool. Never an owner, never an equal, never a threat. They want you to fight for scraps while they own the bakery. They want you to blame yourself for poverty while they hoard the profits of your labor. They love to tell you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but they never tell you they stole your boots. They never tell you they own the factory that makes the boots. They never tell you they set the price so high you could work a lifetime and still not afford a pair. That's the hustle. That's the con. And they've run that game for generations. Dress the lie up in patriotism. Wrap it in flags. Inject it into your education. Preach it in your churches. Sell it in your media. And repeat it until the oppressed forget they're in chains. But the truth is still the truth. And the truth is this: The economic system we live under is modern slavery, dressed in suits, armed with laws, protected by police, and blessed by politicians. It is not broken. It is working exactly as it was designed. It was built to extract labor and consolidate power. It was built to keep the few rich and the many poor. It was built to reward obedience and punish resistance. And unless it is challenged, exposed, dismantled, it will continue to eat lives, dreams, and generations like it has since the first coin was minted on the backs of slaves. We must not just resist, we must unlearn. We must unlearn the lies they fed us, unlearn the myths of merit and markets, unlearn the obedience that passes for discipline. Because the truth doesn't need permission. It needs courage. It needs clarity. It needs people who will no longer be seduced by the lie of progress while standing knee deep in chains. We are not lazy. We are locked out. We are not inferior. We are intentionally oppressed. And we are not powerless unless we believe the lie that we are. History shows us that no system rooted in exploitation will ever grant justice. No master will ever free his slave out of kindness. It is always the people who must rise, the people who must rebuild, the people who must decide that their dignity is worth more than a paycheck, that their children deserve more than survival, that their labor is sacred, not for sale. When that awakening happens, when enough people open their eyes and close their wallets, when they stop selling their souls for survival, then the game ends. Then the pyramid collapses. Then the plantation burns. If you don't own your time, you don't own your life. And if someone else controls your time, if they decide when you rise, when you eat, when you rest, when you go home, how much you're worth, then don't lie to yourself and call that freedom. That's not freedom. That's just slavery with a time clock. You've been taught to believe that as long as you're paid for your labor, you're free. But if that pay isn't enough to live, if that wage barely keeps you breathing, if every month feels like a struggle for air, then you're not being paid, you're being pacified. You're being kept alive just enough to keep working, not enough to stop working. That's not liberation. That's captivity in motion. They call it a job. But let's tell the truth. A job that takes your body, drains your mind, robs your spirit, and barely gives you enough to survive, that's not a job, that's a sentence. That's a slow execution. You spend the best years of your life trading your energy for crumbs, and they've trained you to say, thank you. They've trained you to believe that a paycheck is a gift, not a right. That suffering is part of the deal. That exhaustion is normal. That weekends are rewards and retirement is salvation. But what is retirement to a man who's given everything and has nothing left? What is rest to a woman who's spent 40 years working only to retire into poverty and pills? That's not a life. That's a trap, and the trap is deeper than dollars. It's about ownership. Because when you don't own your time, you don't own your labor. And when you don't own your labor, you don't own your destiny. You work for someone else's goals. You build someone else's dream. You sweat for someone else's profit. And then they turn around and tell you to work harder. Be grateful, be humble, be patient. Patience is the poison they feed the poor to keep them docile. Humility is the leash they wrap around the necks of workers. They tell you to climb the ladder while they hold the ladder, shake the ladder, and sell pieces of it to the highest bidder, and still we climb. Still we believe. Still we hope that maybe, just maybe, one day we'll be free. But freedom doesn't come from begging. It doesn't come from obedience. It doesn't come from promotion. It comes from power. And power starts with ownership. Now let's rip the next layer off this lie, because they'll tell you that poverty is your fault. That if you're broke, if you're struggling, if you can't make ends meet, it's because you're lazy, because you didn't work hard enough, because you didn't try. But let's look at the facts. Let's look at the math. If hard work alone could lift people out of poverty, every farm worker would be a millionaire. Every nurse, every teacher, every janitor, every delivery driver would live in mansions. But they don't, because the truth is, the hardest workers are the most exploited. The most essential workers are the most underpaid. And the richest people on this planet do the least labor. That's not an accident. That's not a flaw in the system. It is the system. Poverty isn't a result of poor choices. Poverty is a result of powerful choices made by the few to keep the many on their knees. The game is rigged before you even enter it. From the schools you're sent to the neighborhoods you're born in, to the food you eat, the air you breathe, the money you're given. It's all set up to trap you early and keep you running forever. They want you chasing dollars, chasing status, chasing an illusion. Because as long as you're chasing, you're not organizing. As long as you're chasing, you're not resisting. As long as you're chasing, they stay in power. They teach you to blame the poor for being poor. They point fingers at the struggling and call them failures. But the real failure is a system that lets billionaires hoard wealth while children starve. The real disgrace is a world where food rots in landfills while families go hungry. The real crime is that there's enough for everyone, but access is controlled by the few. Scarcity is not natural. It's manufactured. It's engineered. It's weaponized to keep you begging, keep you praying, keep you obedient. You don't see the change because you've been trained not to look. You've been trained to compete with your brother instead of confronting the master. You've been trained to believe that struggle is a sign of weakness instead of a symptom of oppression. They put you in a burning building and tell you to climb faster. They flood the ship and say, swim harder. But the truth is, the ship was never meant to carry all of us. It was designed for them, and only them. And the rest of us were always cargo, always disposable, always replaceable. And the sickest part of it all is how they market the struggle. They turn poverty into a personal failure and wealth into a moral victory. They make the rich look like heroes, like geniuses, like innovators. But what did they really do? Exploit workers, evade taxes, inherit blood money, own land they never tilled, patent ideas they never invented. What they call entrepreneurship is often just exploitation dressed in legal language. What they call innovation is just theft with better lawyers. And still, they have the nerve to preach to the poor, to tell them to budget better, to wake up earlier, to grind harder. But the truth is, no amount of budgeting can fix a rigged economy. No amount of discipline can save you from a system that was never built for your success, because this isn't about personal growth. It's about systemic control. It's not about character. It's about power. It's not about motivation. It's about liberation. So what do they do when the poor get restless? When the people start waking up, they criminalize poverty. They militarize police. They turn cities into war zones and prisons into profit centers. They fill cages with the desperate, the hungry, the forgotten. They turn poverty into a pipeline to punishment. They say you're free, but build entire industries on your incarceration. They say the system works, but only if you ignore who it works for and who it was built against. Let's stop pretending this is about a few bad apples. The whole orchard is rotten. The soil is soaked in centuries of blood and greed. This system was never meant to heal. It was built to harvest, built to divide, built to keep the masses too busy surviving to ever start revolting. And when you do revolt, when you rise up, when you speak truth, they call you a threat. They call you dangerous. Because truth is dangerous to a lie that's lasted this long. Justice is dangerous to an economy built on injustice. Real freedom is dangerous to those who depend on your chains. So what must be done? You must recognize that your labor is power, that your time is sacred, that your poverty is not your shame, but their crime, that your suffering is not a mistake, but a product, and that the only way out is not up the ladder they built for you, it's tearing that ladder down. You must stop chasing the carrot and start grabbing the whip. Stop trying to join the system and start dismantling it, because this system is not broken. It is functioning exactly as intended. And as long as we keep playing by its rules, we will keep losing. They will keep feeding on our labor, silencing our voices, stealing our futures, and blaming us for it. They will keep turning our pain into their profit, our struggle into their success, our lives into their ledgers. Unless we wake up, unless we rise up, unless we organize not as individuals, not as workers begging for raises, but as a people demanding our birthright, not charity, not inclusion, not reform, power, ownership, dignity, self-determination. They used to storm villages with rifles and chains. Now they arrive in suits and ties with contracts and smiles. But don't be fooled. The theft hasn't stopped. It's just been dressed up in diplomacy. The colonizer didn't disappear. He just got smarter. He traded his whip for a loan agreement. He swapped his flag for a corporate logo. The plunder is still happening. It's just hidden behind language that sounds legal, that sounds civil, that sounds modern. But it's the same crime, the same blood, the same arrogance. What we call foreign investment is just a new kind of invasion. What we call development is just domination with better marketing. Go look at the soil of Africa, richer than any in Europe. Go look at the rivers of the Congo, the gold in Ghana, the diamonds in South Africa, the oil in Nigeria. You tell me how those nations are poor. You tell me how that wealth just disappeared. It didn't disappear. It was stolen, systematically, deliberately, viciously. And that theft has never stopped. The same countries that chained African bodies are now chaining African economies. They lend money with one hand and extract 10 times more with the other. They offer aid with conditions that guarantee dependence. They call it partnership, but it's just a modern plantation with global branding. And don't think for a second that this is just about Africa. It's the same story in the Caribbean, in South America, in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East. They find a country rich in resources but weak in power, and they pounce. They promise roads, factories, jobs, but what they deliver is debt, corruption and control. They use trade deals to strip sovereignty. They use military bases to intimidate. They use NGOs to spy. They use banks to enslave entire generations. This isn't aid, it's warfare, economic warfare, colonialism with calculators, empire without armies. They never left. They just changed their strategy. And the cruelest part, they've convinced the victims to thank them for the exploitation. They've trained the oppressed to believe that without the oppressor, they would starve. That without foreign companies, there would be no jobs. That without Western banks, there would be no stability. That is the deepest slavery of all, not just the loss of land, not just the loss of wealth, but the loss of confidence, the loss of the belief that we can build for ourselves, the theft of self-determination. And while they rob you, they distract you, they dazzle you with skyscrapers, sports, gadgets, and entertainment. They sell you the image of success while they're harvesting your future. And you're too busy chasing dreams they manufactured to see the nightmare they're imposing. They've turned the whole world into a marketplace where every human being is just a product, every culture is for sale, every resource is up for grabs, and if you resist, if you speak out, if you organize, they label you a radical, a terrorist, because to them, stability means control. Stability means silence. Stability means slavery. But the truth is loud. The truth is unrelenting. The truth is that the chains of economic domination are not accidental. They are deliberate. They are written into law, built into contracts, enforced by police, and backed by tanks. The corporations that mine the gold and pump the oil are more powerful than most governments. They decide policy, they choose leaders, they dictate the future. And while they preach about free markets, what they really want is a rigged game where they always win and the rest of the world always loses. Look at the factories where children work in toxic air to make the clothes you wear. Look at the plantations where families break their backs for crops they will never taste. Look at the slums where workers sleep after spending 16 hours building devices for billionaires. Then tell me this system isn't slavery. Then tell me that globalization is about progress. It's not progress. It's piracy with better PR. It's exploitation wrapped in the language of opportunity. And here's the worst part. They've sold you a dream so powerful, you'll fight to protect the very system that's killing you. You'll defend your boss before you defend your brother. You'll worship a brand before you love your neighbor. You'll step on others for a raise while the owner makes 100 times more than both of you combined. That's the power of the lie. That's the brilliance of the con. They don't just steal your labor, they steal your mind. They steal your loyalty. They convince you that you're climbing a ladder when really you're sinking in quicksand. You want proof? Look at the workers who brag about never taking a day off. Look at the poor who blame other poor people for their suffering. Look at the ones who vote for billionaires, thinking one day they'll join their club. That's not ambition. That's hypnosis. That's indoctrination. They've made struggle look noble and wealth look divine. They've convinced you that your worth depends on your productivity. That rest is laziness. That failure is personal. That poverty is shameful. But what's shameful is a world that allows the few to feast while the many fight for scraps. They've turned your pain into a product. your dreams into a market, your life into data. You are tracked, measured, profiled, and sold. Every move you make, every word you say, every click, every purchase. You are not living, you are being farmed. You are being studied like livestock, optimized like software, harvested like a resource. And while you scroll and binge and buy, they tighten the leash, they pump your rent, they freeze your wages, they drain your time, they own the platforms, the banks, the networks. They own the information. They shape the narrative. They decide what you want before you even know you want it. And they keep you chasing, always chasing, chasing more money, more status, more stuff. They flood your life with images of luxury, success, beauty, power, all of it fake, all of it unattainable. But you keep running, thinking maybe you'll get there. Maybe if you hustle harder, maybe if you sacrifice more, maybe if you sell just a little more of yourself, but you won't. Because the finish line doesn't exist, the game is rigged. And the faster you run, the more exhausted you become. That exhaustion is the goal, because tired people don't rebel. Tired people don't organize. Tired people don't fight back. So they sell you dreams. They manufacture hope. They feed you just enough to keep you believing. They make sure the poor believe in riches, the worker believes in promotions, the desperate believe in luck. They give you lotteries and get rich quick schemes. They dangle influencers, success stories, overnight millionaires, always a few to make the rest believe. That's the trick. That's the illusion. Because if everyone knew the truth, that the system is designed to keep you running, but never arriving, the whole damn thing would collapse. They don't fear your labor. They don't fear your struggle. They fear your awakening. They fear the moment you stop chasing and start questioning. They fear the day you realize your value is not in what you consume, but in what you create, that your power is not in competition, but in solidarity, that your worth is not in your wage, but in your humanity. When that day comes, when the veil lifts and the lies fall apart, then they have a real problem. Because then the slaves stop being slaves, then the workers stop building pyramids for pharaohs. Then the people stop kneeling and start rising. And that rise won't come from a ballot box alone. It won't come from a petition or a hashtag. It will come from people who refuse to be lied to, refuse to be used, refuse to sell their souls for survival. It will come from those who know the truth and have the courage to speak it. Who look at the master and say, no more. Who look at the system and say, this is not justice. Who look at the mirror and say, I am not the problem, I am the power. They tell you you're free because you can vote. They tell you you're free because you can choose between one puppet and another. They say you're free because every 4 years they hand you a ballot and call it power. But let me ask you something. If you can vote but can't eat, are you free? If you can choose your president but not your rent, are you free? If you can wave a flag but can't afford to bury your mother, are you free? They parade your freedom like it's a trophy, but all you really have is the illusion of choice inside a system you never built and will never control. You don't control the money, you don't control the land, you don't control the schools, the banks, the courts, or the prisons. And yet they want you to believe that checking a box every few years makes you a citizen. No. It makes you a subject in a rigged game, It makes you a pawn in their democracy, a democracy that works for them, not for you. Don't get me wrong, they'll let you vote. They'll let you march. They'll let you complain. But when you ask to own something, when you demand control over the wealth you create, the land you live on, the resources beneath your feet, they call you dangerous. When you start organizing for real power, not just visibility, they send in the cops, the judges, the tanks, because power is not in the vote, it's in the ownership of land, ownership of labor, ownership of resources, ownership of your time, your body, your life. And as long as you don't own, you are not freed. You are tolerated. You are marketed to, taxed, watched, exploited, but never truly free. They teach you to celebrate superficial victories while you bleed out economically. They hand you symbols, not substance. A black president in the White House while black communities rot. A woman on $100 bill while women are still underpaid. They give you rainbow flags while funding corporations that crush workers of every color, gender, and orientation. That's not progress. That's pacification. That's public relations dressed up as justice. That's the plantation master giving you new clothes while you still pick the same cotton. And too many of us clap for it. Too many of us defend it because we've been taught to measure our liberation by proximity to power instead of possession of power. Let me say this loud so it echoes through every ghetto, every barrio, every slum, every cell block, every sweatshop, every corner where the poor struggle to breathe. You are not free until you control the system that controls you, not until you write the laws, not until you own the land, not until you decide what justice looks like and what wealth means. You are not free when you depend on your oppressor's economy to feed your children. You are not free when your survival depends on obeying a system that profits from your pain. They've taught you to be grateful for rights they never respected, to celebrate progress that never reached you, to believe that this system could one day be fair if you just waited long enough. But you've waited long enough. Your grandmother waited, her mother waited, and the same boot is still on your neck. Understand the game. They keep you focused on the ballot so you don't look at the banks. They keep you shouting at politicians so you don't organize your workplace. They keep you loyal to a flag so you forget who owns the land. They flood you with media, with lies, with distractions, to keep you busy while they steal everything you build. They call it democracy, but you don't decide who profits. You don't decide who goes to war. You don't decide who lives in cages and who lives in penthouses. You don't decide who gets loans, who gets health care, who gets educated, who gets protected. You are ruled by markets. You are ruled by interests. You are ruled by people who will never meet you, never care about you, and never stop feeding on your labor. That is why the only real freedom is not symbolic, it's structural. And you will never restructure a house while sitting politely in its living room. You must own the blueprint. You must tear down the walls and rebuild the foundation. And that starts not with asking, not with begging, not with hoping, but with organizing, with reclaiming, with refusing to play the game by their rules, because the system is not broken. It's working exactly as designed. And the design is domination. The blueprint is exploitation. The foundation is theft. And as long as you live inside it, You will be owned by it. Now let me speak to the workers, to the people who make this whole world move. You build the homes, you cook the meals, you drive the trucks, you teach the children, you clean the floors, you plant the food, you stitch the clothes, you assemble the machines, you nurse the sick, you make the profits, you make the wealth, you make the world, and yet, what do you own? What do you have to show for all the sweat, the hours, the years you've given? You have wages that vanish before the weekends. You have debts you didn't create. You have stress that eats your body. You have bosses who profit while you break. And here's the truth they will never teach you in school. Until the workers own the work, the people will remain in chains. I don't care how many jobs they offer, how many laws they pass, how many speeches they give. If you don't own, you're still a servant. You're still disposable. You're still one bad week away from eviction, one illness away from collapse. Because when you don't own the tools, the company, the land, the capital, you are always begging someone else for your daily bread. You are always one step from starvation, and they like it that way because fear is the leash they use to keep you quiet. Ownership is everything. Ownership means you control your time. Ownership means you decide your value. Ownership means you are not at the mercy of men who see you as a cost. But they don't want workers thinking about ownership. They want you competing with each other. They want you blaming immigrants, blaming welfare, blaming the unemployed, blaming automation, blaming everyone except the billionaires who hoard the wealth you create. It's divide and conquer. It's psychological warfare. Because if the workers ever saw their true strength, ever stood together, ever refused to be exploited, this system would tremble. Look around you. The food you eat is grown by people who can't afford to eat well. The clothes you wear are made by people who can't clothe their children. The cities you live in are built by people who are pushed out of those same cities. This is not a flaw in the economy. This is the economy, a system where the workers get crumbs and the owners get yachts, where the poor get punishment and the rich get bailouts, where labor is abundant but dignity is scarce. That is not a sustainable system. That is not a just system. That is a powder keg waiting to explode. But they tell you to be patient. They tell you to work hard. They tell you that one day you'll climb the ladder. What they don't tell you is that the ladder is owned. The ladder is guarded. The ladder is broken. And even if you reach the top, they'll still own the building. They'll still control the laws. They'll still write the rules. Because the issue is not climbing, it's building a new structure. One where the people who do the work also make the decisions. One where communities control the resources beneath their feet. One where profit is not more sacred than people. That is what ownership means. That is what revolution requires. Don't let them fool you with fancy language. Don't let them seduce you with soft promises. This isn't about inclusion. It's about control. They'll give you a seat at the table, but not a share of the meal. They'll let you speak, but not decide. They'll let you march, but not own. And as long as they own what matters, the land, the tools, the wealth, you will never be free. You will just be tolerated, managed, appeased. The worker must own the work. The community must own the land. The people must own the systems they live under. That's not radical. That's righteous. That's not dangerous. What's dangerous is a world where the few decide everything and the many die slowly. What's dangerous is silence in the face of suffering. What's dangerous is obedience to injustice. So I'm not here to beg for justice from the same institutions that profit from injustice. I'm not here to ask the powerful to give up their power willingly. I'm here to tell the truth. I'm here to rip off the masks, to expose the modern plantation for what it is, and to light a fire in those who are tired of crawling through life on their knees. Because until we recognize this system as slavery, we will continue to act like beggars instead of fighters. Until we see that our chains are economic, psychological, and global, we will continue to believe that a new job or a new politician will save us. But freedom doesn't come from above. It comes when the people below stop cooperating with their own oppression. When the workers stop building pyramids for pharaohs. When the poor stop blaming themselves for the poverty imposed upon them. This system feeds on silence. It survives on confusion. It thrives on obedience. But when truth is spoken boldly, when people begin to think clearly and act collectively, then the spell is broken. Then the chains shatter. Then the masters tremble. Because there is nothing more dangerous than a people who know the system they live under and refuse to serve it any longer.